Pyramid Head's identity. Pyramid Head, as James Sunderland's manifested guilt. In Silent Hill 2, this creature appears exclusively in James's journey, and fans argue it represents his desire for punishment after killing Mary. The design supports this through deliberately sexual imagery, particularly in the mannequins scene early in the game, mirroring James's sexual frustration during Mary's illness. Pyramid Head both protects James by killing other monsters, and punishes Maria repeatedly, the woman who represents his desires. The creature's metal helmet obscures vision and hearing, symbolizing James's willful blindness to his own crime. Developer interviews confirm the name Red Pyramid Thing was intentional, referencing executioners while avoiding direct explanation. The creature only appears in locations tied to James's guilt: the apartment building where he stayed, the hotel where he and Mary vacationed, the labyrinth representing his confused mind. When James finally accepts his crime in the hotel's final corridor, two pyramid heads commit mutual destruction, their purpose fulfilled. This theory suggests Silent Hill doesn't spawn random monsters, but creates specific manifestations of each visitor's psyche. Angela's personal hell. The theory that Angela Orozco experiences her own separate Silent Hill, overlapping with James's. When James meets Angela in the cemetery, she asks if he saw Mama, despite James seeing no one. Throughout their encounters, Angela describes seeing things James cannot: fire spreading through rooms he perceives as normal, monsters he never encounters. In the abstract daddy boss fight, James enters Angela's nightmare temporarily, fighting a manifestation of her abusive father, represented as a piston-driven mechanical monstrosity. The creature's design emphasizes mechanical repetition and violation, themes specific to Angela's trauma. Most significantly, in their final meeting on the burning staircase, Angela tells James, "For me, it's always like this," while James sees flames for the first time in her presence. She climbs the stairs into fire, and James cannot follow because the flames don't exist in his Silent Hill. This suggests the town generates personalized hells for each visitor simultaneously, with occasional intersections. Angela's monsters, environment, and ultimate fate remain unique to her guilt and trauma. The town doesn't create one shared nightmare, but infinite overlapping ones. Born from a wish. Maria's awareness of her artificial nature in the Born from a Wish scenario. This side story in Silent Hill 2 shows Maria before meeting James, wandering an empty Silent Hill and contemplating existence. She finds the Baldwin mansion, where Ernest Baldwin speaks to her through a locked door, refusing to see her. Maria repeatedly questions whether she should exist, holding a revolver and considering ending herself despite having no apparent reason for despair. Ernest tells her she cannot truly die because she was born from a wish, though he refuses to elaborate. The mansion contains no other people, and Maria can find Ernest's diary describing his isolation and philosophical questions about creation. When Maria finally breaks in, Ernest has vanished completely, and fans theorize he never existed, representing Maria's conversation with herself. Her knowledge that someone wished her into existence, combined with her purpose-driven attraction to James when they meet, suggests consciousness of being a construct. The scenario's title directly states her origin, yet Maria behaves as though discovering this truth during gameplay. This theory argues Maria knew what she was, but struggled with accepting existence as someone else's fantasy, given flesh. James did it before. Evidence suggesting James Sunderland visited Silent Hill previously, and the town erased his memory. When James arrives, he demonstrates knowledge of locations he shouldn't possess. He navigates directly to specific areas, including the observation deck Mary called their special place. However, James contradicts himself, claiming he received a letter from Mary, but also stating he doesn't know why he came to Silent Hill specifically. In the Lakeview Hotel, James finds the room where he and Mary stayed, yet he earlier claimed they visited years ago, before Mary's illness. The timeline inconsistency suggests memory manipulation. Angela recognizes something familiar about the town when speaking with James, implying multiple visitors experience similar confusion. James's instant recognition of certain locations, combined with his contradictory statements about whether Mary could have sent the letter, points to suppressed memories. The letter itself appears blank in certain endings, suggesting it never existed, and James created a false justification for returning. This theory proposes James visited Silent Hill during or after Mary's death, possibly to scatter ashes or process guilt, but the town trapped him in a loop, forcing him to confront his crime repeatedly until he accepts truth. Each loop erases previous visits, creating fresh psychological torture. The Order's partial success. The theory that the cult achieved partial success in birthing their god through Alessa. In Silent Hill 3, Heather possesses abilities no normal human should have. She kills monsters with unexplained power, senses supernatural events, and most significantly, expels a fetus god from her body through sheer will. The cult's goal in the original Silent Hill was creating God through Alessa's suffering, and while Harry stopped the ritual's completion, the ending shows Alessa splitting into baby Cheryl. Fans argue this split wasn't defeat, but transformation, creating an incomplete God divided into two halves. When Harry dies, and Heather recovers memories, she displays powers suggesting divine nature. She navigates the otherworld instinctively, her presence affects reality around her, and she destroys the cult's second attempt at birth by consuming the god fetus and vomiting it as a corpse. This act should be impossible for a human. Claudia's entire plan relies on Heather already being the god, requiring only awakening. The fact that Heather can reject her divine purpose might prove the god was born, but remains incomplete, possessing consciousness and choice rather than absolute power. The Order succeeded in creating divinity, but failed to control it, producing a god with human will and the ability to refuse her role. Lisa's aware entrapment. The theory that Lisa Garland knew she was dead and trapped from the beginning of Silent Hill. When Harry meets Lisa in Alchemilla Hospital, she provides information too readily, acts as a convenient guide, and demonstrates knowledge of the town's supernatural nature without questioning it. She claims to be a nurse caring for Alessa, yet no other hospital staff exist, and she shows no surprise at Harry's sudden appearance. Throughout their conversations, Lisa speaks about her situation with resignation rather than confusion, using phrases like, "I'm the same as them," before Harry understands what "them" means. In the basement, when Lisa's transformation begins, she doesn't react with shock, but with desperate pleading, as though she knew this moment would eventually arrive. Her decomposition suggests she died long before meeting Harry, possibly during the original ritual 7 years earlier. The theory argues Lisa maintained her human appearance through willpower and the presence of living visitors, but she remained constantly aware of her true state. Her clinging to Harry in their final encounter represents not sudden realization, but final acceptance that she can no longer maintain the illusion. She knew what she was, knew she couldn't leave, and consciously chose to help Harry despite understanding it would change nothing for her. The town trapped her with full awareness, as punishment for her role in Alessa's suffering. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I post videos like this regularly. Subscribing would really help out. Eddie's victim status. Whether Eddie Dombrowski's original killing was legitimate self-defense gone wrong. Eddie tells James he killed a man for making fun of him, shot a dog for barking at him, and generally presents himself as violent and unstable. However, his story contains inconsistencies that suggest a more complex origin. Eddie mentions being bullied his entire life, describes physical abuse, and shows signs of severe psychological trauma beyond simple anger issues. The man he killed allegedly bullied him for years, and Eddie's description suggests extended torment rather than a single insult. In a society that often dismisses verbal and emotional abuse as insufficient justification for violence, Eddie's response might have been genuine self-defense against someone who posed real danger. His subsequent actions in Silent Hill, killing a man in a meat locker and attempting to kill James, demonstrate clear psychological breakdown, but these occurred after the original incident. The theory suggests Eddie's first killing was justified or accidental during legitimate self-defense, but society's judgment of him as a murderer, combined with his existing trauma, shattered his remaining stability. Silent Hill then manifested his deterioration, creating victims for him to kill and confirming society's judgment. The monsters Eddie faces appear as victims mocking him, suggesting the town feeds his paranoia and self-loathing. Eddie became the monster everyone said he was, but only after being treated as one first. Heather is neither. The theory that Heather Mason is neither Alessa nor Cheryl, but a completely new person created from their merger. In Silent Hill 3, Heather possesses memories from both previous identities, but demonstrates a distinct personality unlike either. Cheryl was a child who barely existed before the events of the first game, and Alessa was a tortured, vengeful girl, consumed by pain and hatred. Heather displays optimism, sarcasm, resilience, and characteristics belonging to neither predecessor. She questions her identity throughout the game, asking, "Who am I?" when confronting Claudia, and expressing confusion about which memories truly belong to her. When Harry dies, Heather's memories fully return, yet she doesn't become Alessa or revert to Cheryl, but integrates both into something new. This follows philosophical questions about personal identity. If consciousness is continuous memory and personality, and both were disrupted in Heather's creation, she cannot be either original person. She's a reincarnation in the truest sense, a soul reborn with fragments of past lives, but fundamentally different. The game supports this through Heather's choices, which differ from both Alessa's vengeful nature and Cheryl's innocence. She chooses compassion for Claudia despite having reason for hatred, showing growth beyond her predecessors. The cult wanted to awaken Alessa, but Alessa no longer exists. Only Heather remains, a third person who inherited two histories. Valtiel controls everything. The theory that Valtiel, not the town itself, actively manipulates events across the Silent Hill series. This creature appears in Silent Hill 3 as a stalking figure in the Otherworld, constantly watching Heather, but never directly attacking. Developer notes confirm Valtiel serves as the attendant of God, preparing for divine birth. However, Valtiel's appearances extend beyond this single game. In Silent Hill 2, a similar creature appears in brief background moments, cranking valves and manipulating the Otherworld's transitions. In Silent Hill Origins, Travis encounters pyramid-marked figures resembling Valtiel's design, suggesting the entity's presence throughout the series. The theory argues Valtiel doesn't serve the cult, but serves the concept of God itself, working to ensure divine birth regardless of human intervention. When Claudia's plan fails, Valtiel doesn't vanish, but continues his eternal role, waiting for the next attempt. His appearance is manipulating environmental elements, the Otherworld transitions occurring precisely when needed, and his survival despite multiple games' endings suggest intelligence and purpose beyond simple monster behavior. Valtiel might be what actually generates each visitor's personalized nightmare, taking the town's passive supernatural nature and actively shaping it to break down psychological barriers. The cult worships God, but Valtiel is the mechanism making godhood possible, the eternal servant who transcends individual game storylines and operates across all timelines. Murphy's manufactured guilt. The theory that Murphy Pendleton is innocent of his convicted crime, but Silent Hill requires him to believe himself guilty. In Silent Hill Downpour, Murphy was convicted of murdering a correctional officer, but maintains his innocence throughout the game. The evidence against him appears circumstantial: witness testimony from unreliable sources, forensic evidence that could be interpreted multiple ways, and a conviction that occurs during a period of Murphy's grief and confusion. The Wheelman, a taxi driver who appears throughout Murphy's journey, seems to know more about Murphy's past than Murphy himself, suggesting manipulation of events. Murphy's son was murdered by a pedophile named Patrick Napier, and Murphy killed Napier in prison, a crime he openly acknowledges. However, the murder of the correctional officer, which Murphy denies, remains suspicious. The theory suggests either the officer's death was accidental during Murphy's attack on Napier, or someone framed Murphy to ensure additional punishment. Silent Hill then builds Murphy's experience around manufactured guilt, forcing him to accept blame for a crime he didn't commit. The town's power requires guilt to function, but what happens when someone truly innocent arrives? The theory argues Silent Hill creates false guilt, implanting doubt and forcing Murphy to question his own innocence until he believes the lie. The town manufactures the sin it needs to justify punishment. Walter's mother obsession. The theory about Apartment 302's true significance as Walter Sullivan's literal mother figure. In Silent Hill 4 The Room, Walter was born in room 302 of the South Ashfield Heights apartment building and immediately abandoned. He was told, "The room is your mother," by a cult member, and Walter interpreted this literally, developing an obsession with returning to his birthplace. However, fans theorize the room itself, not just metaphorically, but supernaturally, became Walter's mother through Silent Hill's influence. The apartment appears in Walter's Otherworld, preserved exactly as it was during his birth, suggesting the location holds supernatural significance. Henry Townshend, the current tenant, becomes trapped because he occupies Walter's mother, and Walter's ritual requires killing him to free the room. The holes Walter creates throughout the apartment aren't just gateways, but umbilical connections, linking his otherworld to his birthplace. Walter's victims, especially the children, are positioned around the room like offerings to a maternal figure. The theory suggests room 302 gained sentience or supernatural awareness through Walter's belief, becoming an entity that birthed Walter's fractured psyche into the world. Walter doesn't want to return to a location, but to be reborn, entering his mother to become whole. The room's hauntings, Eileen's connection, and the alternate endings all support the idea that the apartment itself is alive and complicit in Walter's crimes. Maria's loop awareness. The theory that Maria becomes aware of her death and resurrection cycle in Silent Hill 2. Maria dies multiple times during James's journey, stabbed by Pyramid Head in the hospital, found hanging in a cell, killed again in the final confrontation. Each death seems permanent, yet Maria returns without explanation, often with slightly different behavior. In early encounters, Maria acts seductively and playfully, performing her role as Mary's fantasy replacement. However, in later appearances, particularly in the labyrinth and prison, Maria's dialogue becomes increasingly bitter and accusatory. She questions James's treatment of her, asks why he keeps skips letting her die, and demonstrates knowledge of events she wasn't present for. The theory suggests Maria gains consciousness through repeated death, each resurrection adding memory and awareness. She begins understanding her purpose as a construct, while simultaneously developing genuine feelings, creating existential horror as she realizes she exists only to die repeatedly. In the Maria ending, where James chooses her over Mary's memory, Maria's coughing fit suggests she's becoming Mary, trapped in another cycle. This might represent Maria's full awareness. She knows accepting James means becoming Mary, dying slowly, and potentially being murdered again. The loop awareness makes Maria's fate darker than simple death. She's conscious of being a tool, aware of her deaths, and forced to continue performing her role despite knowing it's meaningless. Toluca Prison's true purpose. The theory about why Toluca Prison manifests for multiple protagonists across different games. The prison appears prominently in Silent Hill 2, when James traverses it, searching for Maria, in Silent Hill Downpour, as Murphy's main environment, and in references throughout other games. Fans theorize the prison represents Silent Hill's Judgment Chamber, the location where the town formally condemns visitors for their crimes. James enters it when pursuing Maria, symbolizing his imprisonment by desire and guilt. Murphy begins there, already condemned by human law, and Silent Hill extends that judgment. Walter Sullivan's ritual in Silent Hill 4 involves a prison cell where his crimes began. The theory suggests every visitor to Silent Hill passes through the prison, whether physically or metaphorically, because the town operates on principles of crime and punishment. The prison manifests most strongly for those whose guilt involves societal judgment. James committed murder, Murphy was convicted, Walter was institutionalized. For others like Heather or Harry, the prison remains less prominent because their guilt is personal rather than criminal. The prison's consistent appearance across games, despite different time periods and protagonists, suggests it exists outside normal reality as a permanent fixture of Silent Hill's supernatural landscape. The town builds personalized nightmares around this core location, using it as the foundation for judgment. Everyone who comes to Silent Hill is on trial, and the prison is where that trial occurs. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing so you don't miss future uploads. Thanks for watching.